a black boy helped a billionaire change a flat tire, asking for nothing in return. The next day, a black SUV appeared in front of his house, and what happened next moved the entire neighborhood. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. We have a new special story for you tomorrow. Marcus sat behind the wheel of his Bentley Bentayga, tapping his manicured fingers against the leather-wrapped steering wheel. The interstate stretched endlessly before him, quiet and desolate in the approaching dusk. He glanced at his Patek Philippe watch, muttering under his breath. He had a board meeting in less than an hour, a crucial one that could seal his latest acquisition. But as his luxury SUV glided along the empty highway, there came a sickening pop followed by the unmistakable thump, thump, thump of a flat tire. "Just perfect," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He eased the vehicle onto the shoulder, watching in his rearview mirror as a cloud of dust billowed behind him. The summer heat hit him like a wall as he stepped out, adjusting his Tom Ford suit and loosening his Hermes tie. The situation felt surreal. Here he was, Marcus Chen, one of the most powerful tech entrepreneurs in the country, stranded on a deserted stretch of highway. Marcus knelt beside the tire, wincing as his Italian leather shoes touched the gravel. The damage was obvious, a massive tear in the rubber, likely from debris on the road. He pulled out his smartphone, only to find what he'd feared. No signal. Out here in this dead zone between cities, even his billions couldn't buy him a connection. He stood there for a moment, the setting sun casting long shadows across the pavement. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just that morning, he'd been featured in Forbes discussing his latest tech venture, and now he couldn't even make a simple phone call. His thoughts drifted to his father's words from years ago. "All that money won't matter when you're alone on the road, son." He'd dismissed it then, too focused on building his empire to listen. The heat pressed down harder as Marcus loosened his tie further. He hadn't changed a tire since. Had he ever changed a tire? In his world, there were people for that. Assistants, maintenance teams, roadside services. But out here, between the endless fields of corn and the distant silhouette of grain silos, he was just a man with a flat tire. His mind wandered to the board meeting. The Jensen acquisition had taken months to arrange. Countless sleepless nights, negotiations that pushed him to his limits. Now it was all at risk because of a piece of rubber. He could almost hear the whispers in the boardroom. Maybe he's losing his edge. Perhaps it's time for new leadership. The thought made his jaw clench. Marcus checked his phone again, hoping for even a single bar of service. Nothing. The silence out here was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of cornstalks in the evening breeze. He'd built a fortune on being in control, on anticipating every variable. But this was beyond his reach. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. If he didn't figure something out soon, he'd be stuck here in the dark. The thought made him uncomfortable, not afraid exactly, but unsettled. It reminded him of another time, long ago, when he was just starting out, when every setback felt like the end of the world. He was about to attempt removing the tire himself, when he noticed something, a figure in the distance moving toward him. At first, it was just a silhouette backlit by the setting sun, but as it drew closer, Marcus could make out more details. It was a boy, probably no more than 15, wearing worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, his sneakers kicking up small clouds of dust as he approached. Marcus straightened, adjusting his jacket automatically. Years of board meetings had taught him to maintain composure, even when everything was falling apart. The boy stopped a few feet away, his dark eyes taking in the situation with surprising maturity. "Looks like you could use some help, sir," the boy said, his voice carrying a quiet confidence that caught Marcus off guard. There was something in his expression, not pity or judgment, just a simple recognition of someone in need. Marcus hesitated, torn between his ingrained self-reliance and the reality of his situation. Pride warred with practicality in his mind as he looked at the boy who seemed so sure of himself despite his youth. Finally, practicality won out. "Yes," Marcus admitted, his voice softer than usual. Yes. I suppose I could. The faint whisper of cornstalks in the wind filled the silence between them as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in deepening shades of twilight. Neither of them knew it yet, but this chance encounter on a deserted highway was about to change both their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The boy took a step closer, his movements confident but careful. "Name's Andre," he said, already moving towards the flat tire. "My grandpa's farm is just over that hill. Saw your car from up there." He gestured vaguely toward a distant rise in the landscape, where the fading sunlight caught what might have been a weathered barn. Marcus watched as Andre knelt beside the tire, his young hands already reaching for the lug nuts. "You have a spare, right? Should be under the cargo area in one of these luxury SUVs," he said, glancing up at Marcus with a knowing look that seemed beyond his years. Yes, I suppose I must," Marcus replied, slightly thrown by the boy's expertise. He moved to the back of the vehicle, pressing the button to open the power lift gate. Andre followed, efficiently locating and removing the spare tire and jack while Marcus stood by, feeling strangely useless in his $5,000 suit. "My grandpa always says knowing how to change a tire is more valuable than knowing how to change a stock portfolio," Andre commented, positioning the jack with practiced ease. "He's been teaching me about cars since I was little. Says it's important to know how things work from the ground up." Marcus found himself smiling despite his situation. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." He thought of his own father again, of all the practical lessons he'd tried to teach before Marcus had become too busy, too important for such things. As Andre worked, Marcus noticed details he'd missed in his initial assessment. The boy's sneakers were worn but clean, his clothes simple but well-maintained. There was a quiet dignity in his demeanor, a sense of purpose that resonated with something deep inside Marcus's own past. "You're pretty good at this," Marcus observed, watching as Andre efficiently loosened the lug nuts in a star pattern. "Most kids your age would be glued to their phones." Andre chuckled, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm. "Don't have one of those fancy smartphones, sir. Grandpa says we need to master the basics before we worry about the extras." He paused, looking up at Marcus. "Besides, there's something satisfying about fixing things with your hands, you know." The words struck Marcus with unexpected force. When was the last time he'd fixed anything himself? Created something tangible? His billions had been made in the digital world, in lines of code and market predictions. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt the simple satisfaction of solving a physical problem. As Andre worked, he explained each step clearly, almost like a teacher. "You always want to make sure the car's stable before you jack it up," he said, pointing to the wheel blocks he'd placed. "And you never trust just the jack. That's why we put this spare tire under the frame as a backup. Safety first, my grandpa always says." Marcus found himself oddly engaged, absorbing information he'd never thought he'd need. The boy's knowledge wasn't just mechanical, it was practical wisdom, passed down through generations. It made his own achievements feel somehow less substantial. The sun had nearly set when Andre finally tightened the last lug nut. "There you go, sir," he said, standing up and dusting off his jeans. "That should get you to where you need to go. Just don't drive too fast on that spare, and make sure to get a proper tire soon." Marcus reached for his wallet, pulling out a thick stack of $100 bills. "Please," he said, extending the money toward Andre. "Take this. You've saved me from a very difficult situation." But Andre stepped back, shaking his head with a slight smile. "No need for that, sir. Helping someone out is its own reward. That's what my grandpa taught me." There was no false modesty in his voice, no expectation of a greater reward, just simple, genuine conviction. Marcus stood there, money still extended, feeling more wrong-footed than he had in any billion-dollar negotiation. I insist," he said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Andre just smiled again, already backing away. "The spare tire's on tight, but remember what I said about not driving too fast. Have a good evening, sir." With that, he turned and started walking back the way he'd come, his figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. Marcus watched him go, the unused money still in his hand, feeling something he couldn't quite name. In all his years of business, of deals and acquisitions, he'd never encountered someone who so completely rejected his wealth, who helped simply because it was the right thing to do. As he climbed back into his Bentley, Marcus found himself looking in the rearview mirror, watching until Andre's figure disappeared over the rise. The board meeting, the Jensen acquisition, all of it seemed somehow less urgent now. Something had shifted in his worldview, subtle but significant, like a gear finally clicking into place. He started the engine, but didn't immediately drive away. Instead, he sat there for a moment, thinking about Andre, about his grandfather's lessons, about what real value meant. The cornstalks whispered in the gathering darkness, and Marcus Chen, billionaire, tech mogul, felt something he hadn't experienced in years: humility, and perhaps a touch of shame. Finally, he put the vehicle in drive, but his thoughts weren't on his meeting anymore. They were on a young boy who had everything he'd forgotten and nothing he'd thought was important. As he drove away, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that this wouldn't be the end of their story. The board meeting had gone well enough, but Marcus couldn't focus. Even as he presented the acquisition details, his mind kept drifting back to that dusty roadside, to Andre's simple wisdom and unaffected kindness. He sat now in his penthouse office, 60 stories above the city, watching the sunrise paint the skyline in shades of gold. "Mr. Chen?" His executive assistant, Sarah, appeared in the doorway. "Your 8 a.m. is here." "Cancel it," Marcus said, surprising both of them. "Cancel everything today." Sarah blinked, 15 years of working with him having never prepared her for this moment. "Sir, the Jensen team is expecting—" "They can wait," Marcus said, standing up and walking to the window. "Something more important has come up." He turned to face her, his expression unusually soft. "Sarah, how long have you worked for me?" 15 years this October, sir." "And in all that time, have I ever thanked you?" "Really thanked you, not just with bonuses and raises, but actually expressed gratitude?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. Marcus nodded, mostly to himself. "That's what I thought. Take the day off, Sarah. With pay, of course. Spend it with your family." After she left, clearly confused but pleased, Marcus sat back down at his desk. He opened his laptop, but instead of checking stock prices or acquisition reports, he found himself searching for information about rural communities near where he'd been stranded, about family farms and generational wisdom. His phone buzzed, another board member asking about the Jensen deal. He ignored it. For the first time in decades, money wasn't the most interesting thing in his world. He thought about Andre's worn but clean sneakers, about his confident hands working on the tire, about the quiet pride in his voice when he spoke of his grandfather. Marcus had built his fortune on understanding patterns, on seeing connections others missed. Now he saw something new, the pattern of his own life, the connections he'd severed in his relentless pursuit of success. His father's attempted lessons, dismissed. His mother's calls, increasingly unanswered until they'd stopped coming. Relationships reduced to transactions, humanity to profit margins. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. Thousands of names, CEOs, investors, politicians, but hardly any real connections. No one he could call just to talk, no one who would help him change a tire without expecting something in return. The morning stretched into afternoon as Marcus sat there, lost in thought. Eventually, he did something he hadn't done in years. He called his father. "Marcus?" His father's voice was surprised, perhaps a touch wary. "Is everything all right?" "Dad," Marcus said, his throat unexpectedly tight. "Do you remember when you tried to teach me to change a tire, that summer before college?" A pause. "Of course I do. You said you'd never need to know such things, that you'd be too successful to waste time on manual labor." "I was wrong," Marcus said quietly. "About that, and about a lot of things." The silence that followed was heavy with years of distance, of missed opportunities and unspoken words. Finally, his father spoke. "It's never too late to learn, son." The conversation that followed was awkward at first, then gradually easier. They talked about simple things: the weather, his father's garden, the old neighborhood. When Marcus finally hung up, he felt different, lighter somehow, yet more grounded. He stood up, walking to the window again. The city sprawled below him, a maze of glass and steel he'd helped shape. But now he saw it differently. Behind every window was a story, a life, a potential connection he'd been too busy to consider. His reflection stared back at him from the glass: expensive suit, perfect hair, all the trappings of success. But for the first time, he saw what Andre must have seen. Just a man with a flat tire, no more or less important than anyone else. Marcus made a decision then. He pressed the intercom. "Sarah, I know I told you to take the day off, but I need one thing first. Could you find out everything you can about a farm near where I had the flat tire yesterday? It would be just over the hill from that stretch of highway." "Of course, sir. Anything specific you're looking for?" Marcus thought about Andre's smile, about his grandfather's wisdom passed down through generations. "Everything," he said. "I need to know everything." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his office, Marcus Chen, the man who had everything, realized he was about to embark on a journey to find something money couldn't buy, something a young boy on a dusty road had shown him without even trying. He loosened his tie, a small smile playing at his lips. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would drive that same road again, this time not by accident, but by choice. And this time, he wouldn't be looking for help. He would be looking for something. The next morning, Marcus pulled his black SUV off the main highway, this time deliberately. He'd swapped the Bentley for something less ostentatious, a Mercedes G-Wagon that somehow felt more appropriate for these rural roads. Sarah's research had been thorough, identifying the only farm in the area, the Richardson family property, maintained for 3 generations. The gravel crunched under the SUV's tires as he followed the winding road. His heart beat a little faster as he crested the hill, where Andre had said his grandfather's farm was located. The morning sun illuminated a scene that could have been from another era. A weathered but well-maintained farmhouse, a red barn with fading paint, and fields stretching toward the horizon. As he pulled up to the house, Marcus noticed the small details: a worn basketball hoop attached to the barn, garden tools carefully arranged on the porch, a rocking chair that had seen years of use. This wasn't just property. It was a home, lived in and loved. Before he could even step out of his vehicle, Andre appeared on the porch, his eyes widening in recognition. "Sir?" he called out, descending the wooden steps. "Did you get another flat tire?" There was a hint of teasing in his voice. Marcus smiled, climbing out of the SUV. "No, the spare you put on worked perfectly. First period." He paused, suddenly unsure of himself, a foreign feeling for a man who regularly made billion-dollar decisions without hesitation. "I wanted to thank you properly." An older man appeared in the doorway, his face weathered by years of working under the sun. He moved with deliberate steps down the porch stairs, coming to stand beside Andre. Marcus could see the family resemblance immediately, the same steady gaze, the same quiet dignity. "Grandpa," Andre said, "this is the man I told you about. The one with the flat tire." The older man nodded slowly, studying Marcus with keen eyes. "James Richardson," he said, extending a calloused hand. "My grandson told me about you. Said you tried to pay him for helping." Marcus shook his hand, noting the strength in the grip. "Marcus Chen. And, yes, I did try." "He wouldn't accept it." "Course he wouldn't," James said, a note of pride in his voice. "That's not how we do things around here." He gestured toward the house. "Would you care for some coffee, Mr. Chen?" "Sarah just made a fresh pot." Marcus blinked, surprised. "Sarah." "My daughter." James explained. Andre's mother. Inside, the farmhouse was modest but immaculate. Family photos lined the walls, telling a story of generations. Sarah Richardson turned out to be a woman in her early 30s with Andre's same warm eyes and gentle manner. She poured coffee into mismatched mugs at a kitchen table that had clearly hosted countless family meals. "So, Mr. Chen," Sarah said, setting a mug before him, "what brings a billionaire tech entrepreneur to our farm?" At Marcus's surprised look, she smiled. "We may be rural, but we have internet. Andre showed me your Forbes article after he helped you." Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm mug, appreciating its simple ceramic comfort after years of expensive bone china. "I couldn't stop thinking about what happened yesterday," he admitted. "About Andre's kindness, about how he helped me without wanting anything in return." "That's just who he is," Sarah said softly, glancing at her son with obvious pride. "Who we try to be as a family." "It's more than that," Marcus continued, his voice growing earnest. "It made me realize something. I've spent my life building wealth, creating technology to connect people, but I've never felt more disconnected myself. Yesterday, your son showed me what real connection looks like." James leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus. "Sometimes the simplest lessons are the hardest to learn," he said, "especially when you're too busy looking at the horizon to see what's right in front of you." The words hit Marcus with unexpected force. How many times had he looked past people, seeing them as stepping stones rather than fellow humans? How many connections had he missed while chasing the next big deal? "The farm's been in our family for 3 generations," James continued, gesturing around them. "We're not rich in money, but we're rich in other ways. Community, family, purpose." Marcus looked around the kitchen, seeing the worn but well-loved furniture, the hand-sewn curtains, the fresh flowers in a mason jar. Everything here had a story, a meaning beyond its monetary value. It was so different from his sterile penthouse, with its expensive but soulless decorations. "I want to help," Marcus said suddenly, surprising himself with the intensity of his desire. "Not because I feel obligated, but because I want to be part of something real." The 3 Richardsons exchanged glances. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Chen, we appreciate the offer, but we're not looking for charity." "It's not charity," Marcus insisted, leaning forward. It's an investment. Not in money or property, but in connection. In learning. Your son taught me more in 15 minutes than I've learned in years of board meetings. I want to learn more." James studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well," he said, "harvest season's coming up. We could always use an extra pair of hands, even if they're more used to typing on keyboards than working in the dirt." The offer hung in the air, a chance at something genuine, something meaningful. Marcus looked at Andre, who was watching him with those wise beyond his years eyes, then back at James and Sarah. "I'd like that," he said softly. "I'd like that very much." As the morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, painting the simple room in warm light, Marcus Chen, billionaire tech mogul, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the sense of beginning a journey whose value couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself drawn back to the Richardson farm, with increasing frequency. Each visit revealed new layers of need beneath the property's weathered exterior: a leaking roof on the barn, irrigation systems in need of repair, equipment that had seen better days. But it also revealed something else: a family's unwavering resilience in the face of hardship. One morning, as Marcus pulled up in his now familiar black SUV, he noticed Andre and James working on an old tractor, their heads bent together in concentration. The scene stopped him in his tracks. There was something beautiful about the way knowledge passed between generations, about the patience in James's weathered hands as he guided Andre's younger ones. "Morning, Mr. Chen," Sarah called from the porch where she was shelling peas. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some." But Marcus had other plans today. He opened his SUV's rear door, pulling out a laptop and several folders. "Actually, Sarah, I was hoping to talk with you and James about something." 20 minutes later, They sat around the kitchen table, steam rising from their coffee cups as Marcus laid out his proposal. "I've had my team research sustainable farming initiatives," he began, spreading out documents. "There are ways to modernize the farm without losing its soul. Irrigation systems that could triple your yield, solar panels to cut electricity costs, equipment that could make everything more efficient." James leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. "That sounds expensive, Mr. Chen." "It is," Marcus admitted. "But I'm not offering a loan or asking for anything in return. Think of it as Tantri need an investment in wisdom. He looked at Andre, who was listening intently from his spot by the window. "Your grandson taught me something valuable when he helped me with that tire. He showed me what real wealth looks like. Let me help make sure this farm, this way of life, continues for generations to come." Sarah and James exchanged looks, the kind of silent communication that comes from years of facing challenges together. Finally, Sarah spoke. "We can't accept such a large gift, Mr. Chen. It wouldn't be right." Marcus leaned forward, his voice earnest. "What if it wasn't just a gift? What if we made it a partnership? I have resources, yes, but you have something more valuable. Knowledge, experience, a connection to the land. We could create something special here, something that could help other family farms too." Andre stepped forward, his young face serious. "Like a learning center, right? Where other kids could come and learn what Grandpa taught me?" Marcus smiled, nodding. "Exactly. We could set up programs, teach sustainable farming practices, show people that there's value in knowing how things work from the ground up." He turned back to James and Sarah. "Your family has 3 generations of wisdom. Why not share it with others?" James was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" he finally asked. "More serious than I've been about any business deal in my life," Marcus replied. "And I've made billion-dollar decisions." The next few hours were spent in detailed discussion. Marcus called in his team, architects, agricultural experts, sustainable energy consultants. But he made sure every decision, every plan, went through the Richardsons first. This wasn't about imposing his vision. It was about enhancing theirs. Work began almost immediately. The barn was the first priority. Its roof wouldn't make it through another winter. As crews arrived to begin repairs, Marcus found himself rolling up his sleeves alongside them. Andre watched with amusement as the billionaire, still in his expensive shoes, learned to hammer nails and carry lumber. "You're doing it wrong," Andre would say sometimes, showing Marcus the proper technique with the patience his grandfather had shown him. And Marcus would listen, learning more from this 15-year-old boy than he had from any business consultant. The days took on a new rhythm. Marcus would arrive early, sharing coffee with the family before the day's work began. He learned about crop rotation from James, about the importance of timing and patience. Sarah taught him about the local community, about how farms helped each other during tough times. But it was Andre who continued to be his main teacher. The boy had an intuitive understanding of both the old ways and the new possibilities. He would point out where modern technology could help, but also where traditional methods were still best. His enthusiasm was infectious, making even the hardest work feel meaningful. One evening, as the sun set behind the newly repaired barn, Marcus stood with the family, all of them dirty and tired but satisfied. Solar panels gleamed on the barn's roof, a symbol of the old and new working in harmony. The irrigation systems were half installed, promising better yields for the next season. "You know," James said, breaking the comfortable silence, "when you first showed up here in that fancy SUV, I thought you were just another rich man trying to ease his conscience." Marcus nodded, understanding. "And now?" James smiled, putting an arm around Andre's shoulders. "Now I think maybe you're learning what real riches are." Sarah brought out lemonade, and they sat on the porch steps, watching the stars emerge. The evening was filled with the sounds of crickets and distant farm equipment being shut down for the night. Marcus looked at his once pristine hands, now calloused and dirty, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. "Tomorrow we start on the Learning Center plans," he said, more to himself than the others. "Something that will last, that will help other families keep their farms, their traditions." Andre grinned. "And maybe teach a few more billionaires how to change a tire?" They all laughed, the sound carrying across the fields into the gathering dusk. Marcus Chen, who had spent his life building virtual connections, had finally found something real, something that no amount of money could buy, but that a flat tire and a kind-hearted boy had helped him discover. The transformation of the Richardson farm continued, but the more profound changes were happening within Marcus himself. He'd begun spending more time at the farm than his office, leading his company remotely between helping with chores and learning farming techniques. His board members were confused, his competitors spreading rumors about his mental state. But for the first time in his life, Marcus didn't care about market perceptions. One morning, as he helped Andre feed the chickens, a task that had terrified him at first but now felt almost meditative, Sarah approached with a concerned look. "Mr. Chen, I hope you don't mind, but I looked up your company's stock price. It's down 15% since you started spending time here." Marcus scattered another handful of feed, watching the chickens peck at the ground. "It's down 18% actually," he said calmly. "And please, after all this time, call me Marcus." "Doesn't that worry you?" Andre asked, pausing in his work. Marcus straightened up, brushing dust from his jeans. No more expensive suits these days, at least not while at the farm. "You know what's interesting? My company's value dropped by billions, but I've never felt richer." He looked at Sarah. "Money is just numbers on a screen. What you have here, this knowledge, this connection to the land, to each other, that's real wealth." Sarah's expression softened. "You've changed, Mr. Marcus. Your son changed me," Marcus replied, glancing at Andre with genuine affection. "That day with the flat tire, he showed me something I'd forgotten existed. Kindness without agenda, help without expectation. In my world, everything's a transaction. Everyone wants something. But Andre, he just helped because it was right." Later that afternoon, Marcus sat with James on the porch, taking a break from installing new fencing. The learning center was taking shape behind them, its modern lines somehow fitting perfectly with the traditional farm buildings. "You know," James said, sipping from a mason jar of ice water, "when Sarah first told me who you were, I looked you up. Read about all your achievements, your innovations." He paused, looking out over the fields where Andre was working with the construction crew. "But I think your biggest achievement might be what's happening right here." Marcus followed his gaze. The learning center was already attracting attention. Local farming families had been stopping by, curious about the combination of traditional methods and modern technology. Andre had taken to giving tours, explaining everything with infectious enthusiasm. "I built a tech empire trying to connect people," Marcus said quietly. "Created social platforms, communication tools, all designed to bring people together. But I'd never experienced real connection myself until I got that flat tire." James nodded sagely. "Sometimes the best connections aren't digital. They're in shared work, shared meals, shared purpose." As if on cue, Sarah called them in for dinner. The kitchen table had become Marcus's favorite place in the world. No fancy restaurants could compare to Sarah's home cooking, and the warm conversation that flowed as naturally as the sweet tea she served. Tonight, as they passed dishes around, Andre could hardly contain his excitement. "We had 3 more families visit today," he announced. "They want to learn about the sustainable irrigation system. And guess what? 2 of them have kids my age who want to join the youth program." Marcus smiled, remembering how the idea for the youth program had come from Andre himself. "Teaching other kids what your grandfather taught you about farming?" "Not just farming," Andre corrected. "About life, about helping others, about doing things right, not just doing them quick." Sarah reached over and squeezed her son's hand. "You're becoming quite the teacher, honey." "Tasser." Gets that from you, Sarah, Marcus said. Both of you, actually, he added, nodding to James. The ability to share wisdom, to help others grow, that's a rare gift. After dinner, they all sat on the porch, a habit that had become almost sacred. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, the solar panels on the barn roof catching the last rays of light. Marcus looked at his phone. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of emails. A year ago, he would have been panicked by such negligence. Now, he simply put the phone away. You know, he said, breaking the comfortable silence, my board of directors is meeting tomorrow. They're concerned about my new direction, as they call it. Are you going to the meeting? Andre asked. Marcus nodded. Yes, but not to defend myself. I'm going to tell them about this place, about what we're building here, about how true innovation isn't just about technology. It's about connecting the wisdom of the past with the possibilities of the future. James raised an eyebrow. You think they'll understand? Probably not, Marcus chuckled. But that's okay. I don't need them to understand. I just need them to see that their CEO hasn't lost his mind. He's finally found his purpose. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. The Richardson farm had become more than a project. It had become his sanctuary, his school, his second home. And this family, who had every reason to view him with suspicion, had instead shown him what true wealth looked like. The crickets began their evening symphony, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. Marcus Chen, the billionaire who once measured success in market shares and profit margins, now measured it in moments like these, in shared wisdom, in genuine connections, in the quiet satisfaction of work done well. The day after their porch conversation, Marcus attended his board meeting in the city. As expected, the discussion was tense, with board members expressing their concerns about his recent behavioral changes and questionable priorities. But as he stood before them in his suit, which felt strangely uncomfortable after weeks of farm work, Marcus spoke with a conviction that surprised even himself. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the board, what we're doing at the Richardson farm isn't just charity or a personal project, it's innovation in its purest form. We're creating a model that could revolutionize how we think about sustainable agriculture, education, and community development. The board listened skeptically as he laid out his vision, but by the end of the presentation, even the staunchest critics had to admit there was something compelling about the idea. They agreed to officially support the initiative, though Marcus could tell they still had reservations about their CEO's new direction. But Marcus had one more surprise in store, something he hadn't shared with anyone, not even the Richardsons. It was something that had been forming in his mind during those quiet evening conversations on the porch, something that would ensure the wisdom he'd found at the farm would continue to touch lives for generations to come. It was early evening when his black SUV pulled up to the farm. The learning center was nearly complete now, its modern architecture harmonizing with the traditional farm buildings in a way that seemed to symbolize everything they'd achieved. Andre was the first to spot him, running down from the barn with that ever-present enthusiasm. Marcus, we just had our first official youth group meeting, Andre called out. 15 kids came and they all want to learn about sustainable farming. Marcus smiled, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. That's perfect timing, actually. Could you get your mom and grandfather? I have something important to discuss with everyone. Minutes later, they gathered in the kitchen, their usual meeting spot for important discussions. Sarah poured coffee, while James settled into his familiar chair. Andre perched on the counter, despite his mother's gentle reminder about proper seating. First, Marcus began, I want to thank you all for everything you've taught me these past few months. The lessons I've learned here are worth more than any business deal I've ever made. He placed the envelope on the table. Which is why I want to ensure these teachings continue for generations to come. Sarah looked at the envelope warily. Marcus, you've already done so much. Please, he said softly. Let me finish. He opened the envelope, pulling out several legal documents. I've established a trust, a significant one. It ensures this farm, the learning center, and all the programs we've started will continue indefinitely. James leaned forward, his expression serious. How significant? $500 million, Marcus said quietly. The kitchen fell silent. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Andre's eyes widened to saucers. James simply stared. But that's not all, Marcus continued. The trust isn't just about money. It's structured to preserve what matters most, the principles this family represents. The board includes local farmers, agricultural experts, and education specialists. Andre, he turned to the boy. When you're old enough, there's a place for you on that board too. Me? Andre whispered. You're the heart of this place, Marcus said firmly. You're the one who showed me what real value looks like. The trust will fund scholarships for young people who want to learn farming, support local families who want to keep their farms, and maintain the learning center's programs. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Marcus, this is too much. We can't possibly. It's not too much, Marcus interrupted gently. And it's not just for you. It's for every family trying to keep their farm, for every kid who wants to learn the wisdom your family holds, for every community that needs what we've built here. He pulled out another document. There's more. I've started a new division in my company, Sustainable Agricultural Technologies. The headquarters will be right here, working with farmers to develop technology that serves the land, rather than replacing it. Andre's principles about blending old wisdom with new innovations? That's going to be our mission statement. James stood up slowly, walking to the window. He looked out over the fields, now perfectly irrigated, with their new sustainable system. When you first came here, he said slowly, I thought you were just another rich man, trying to buy meaning. He turned back to Marcus. I was wrong, wasn't I? Marcus nodded. I didn't come here to buy meaning. I came here to learn it. And what I learned is that true wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in the wisdom passed down through generations, in the connections between people, in the ability to help others. Andre jumped down from the counter, walking over to study the documents spread across the table. So the learning center will always be here? Kids will always be able to come learn what Grandpa taught me? Not just kids. Marcus smiled. We're going to have programs for everyone. Farmers wanting to learn sustainable methods, families trying to save their farms, even corporate executives who need to remember what real value looks like. Sarah wiped her eyes, looking at Marcus with a mix of gratitude and understanding. This isn't just about preserving the farm, is it? It's about preserving a way of life. It's about preserving wisdom, Marcus corrected. The kind of wisdom that knows helping others is its own reward. The kind that understands real wealth grows in fields and families, not stock markets. James returned to the table, resting his weathered hand on the documents. You know, when Andre helped you that day, he was just doing what he'd been taught. What my father taught me and his father taught him. Exactly, Marcus said. And now, thanks to him, that teaching will continue. Not just here, but everywhere this program reaches. He turned to Andre. You changed my life that day, with one simple act of kindness. This trust ensures that kind of wisdom, that way of living, will never be lost. The kitchen fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, full of possibility, of future, of hope. Through the window, the setting sun painted the learning center in shades of gold, while the solar panels on the barn roof caught the last light of day. Andre finally broke the silence. Does this mean I have to wear a suit to board meetings? The tension broke as everyone laughed. Marcus shook his head, grinning. No, but you might have to teach the other board members how to change a tire. As the laughter faded, Sarah reached out and squeezed Marcus's hand. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for this, but for understanding what really matters. Marcus looked around at this family that had taught him so much in this kitchen that had become more home to him than his penthouse ever was. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for helping me change more than just a tire." 5 years passed, and the Richardson farm had become something extraordinary. The once modest property now stood as a beacon of sustainable farming and community education, drawing visitors from across the country. The Learning Center, with its perfect blend of traditional architecture and modern efficiency, had become a model for similar programs nationwide. On a warm autumn morning, Marcus's black SUV pulled up the familiar gravel drive, but this time he wasn't alone. A group of corporate executives followed in their luxury cars, looking somewhat out of place in their expensive suits. They were here for what had become known as the Richardson Reset, a program for business leaders to reconnect with fundamental values. Andre, now 20 years old and studying agricultural science in college, was waiting on the porch. He'd grown taller, more confident, but his warm smile remained unchanged. "Another group of lost souls for us to help find their way?" he teased as Marcus approached. "Just like I once was," Marcus replied with a grin. "Though I had the advantage of a flat tire to speed up the process." The executives gathered nervously, their phones already forgotten in their pockets, a strict rule of the program. Sarah emerged from the house, her welcoming presence putting them at ease, while James appeared from the direction of the barn, his weathered face a map of earned wisdom. "Welcome to Richardson Farm," Andre addressed the group, his voice carrying the same quiet confidence he'd shown that day on the highway. "Over the next few days, you're going to learn some surprising things about success, value, and real wealth. And yes," he added with a smile, "you're all going to learn how to change a tire." Marcus stood back, watching as Andre began the introduction. The young man had become an extraordinary teacher, blending his grandfather's wisdom with his own innovative ideas. The sustainable farming programs he'd developed were being implemented across the country, helping countless family farms survive and thrive. The Learning Center hummed with activity. Local farmers mingled with agricultural students, sharing knowledge that bridged generations. In the demonstration fields, new sustainable farming technologies were being tested, while traditional methods were preserved and taught. It was exactly what Marcus had envisioned, but better, because it had grown organically, rooted in the Richardson family's values. Later that afternoon, as the executives struggled with their first hands-on tasks, Marcus found himself back in the familiar kitchen with Sarah and James. The room hadn't changed much, still warm, welcoming, and full of life. "You know," Sarah said, pouring coffee into the same mismatched mugs they'd always used. "When you first set up that trust, I worried it might change things too much, that we'd lose what made this place special." James nodded, looking out the window at the busy farm. "Instead, it helped us share what made it special with others." Marcus watched as Andre demonstrated proper composting techniques to the group of executives, his patience reminiscent of how he'd once taught a billionaire to change a tire. "Your son," Marcus said softly, "he didn't just help me that day. He showed me a path I didn't even know I was looking for." The kitchen door opened, and Andre stepped in, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You won't believe this," he said, grinning. "One of those CEOs just asked if we could set up a similar program at her company's corporate retreat center. She wants to teach executives about sustainable living and community values. The Richardson wisdom spreading further," Marcus mused. "Though I doubt any of them will have quite the same teaching methods as a flat tire on a rural highway." They all laughed, the sound mixing with the distant voices of visitors and the gentle hum of farm equipment. Through the window, they could see the Learning Center, its solar panels gleaming in the afternoon sun, while the old barn stood proud beside it, a perfect symbol of how past and present could work together. "You know what the best part is?" Andre said, accepting a glass of water from his mother. "Every person who comes here leaves with something they didn't expect to find. Just like you did, Marcus." Marcus nodded, thinking back to that dusty evening 5 years ago, I came looking for help with a tire, he said quietly, and found a whole new understanding of wealth. James stood, his movement still strong despite the years. Speaking of wealth, he said with a twinkle in his eye, those executives need to learn about evening chores. Andre, want to show them how real work gets done? Andre grinned, heading for the door. Coming, Grandpa. Marcus, want to help? For old time's sake? Marcus stood rolling up his sleeves, a gesture that had become second nature now. Wouldn't miss it. As they walked out into the golden afternoon light, Marcus looked around at everything they'd built together. The learning center was full of students, the fields were thriving, and everywhere he looked people were connecting, learning, growing. His company's stock had recovered and then some, but that didn't matter to him anymore. His true wealth was here, in this place, with these people who had taught him what really mattered. A group of young farmers in training passed by, eagerly discussing sustainable irrigation methods. Among them was a teenager who reminded Marcus of Andre 5 years ago. Same earnest expression, same desire to help others. The cycle was continuing, wisdom passing from one generation to the next, enriched but unchanged by the modern world around it. The sun began to set over the Richardson farm, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Marcus Chen, the billionaire who had lost his way and found it again thanks to a flat tire and a kind-hearted boy, felt the same peace he'd discovered that first evening. But now it wasn't just his peace. It was a gift being shared with others, spreading out into the world like ripples in a pond. And somewhere in the distance, a car drove past on the highway, its occupants unaware that they were passing a place where true wealth had been discovered. Not in dollars and cents, but in wisdom, kindness, and the simple act of helping others without expecting anything in return.